Hello, welcome to part 1 of Coding for Kids in Scratch. Today we'll be going over chapter 5, which is all about if-then statements. By the end of this chapter, we'll have finished all 4 of the major categories. So let's get started. Before we get started though, let's make a new program by going to the home page, clicking create, and then opening up the editor. Once you're in the editor, go to the control category, because that's where we're going to be working. Last chapter we started by going over loops, and this chapter we'll be finishing this category by going over what are called conditional statements. These blocks are pretty simple, even though they sound intimidating. They're just if-then blocks. Basically, they check if something is true. Then, if the condition is true, then it does something. That's it. So to use these if-then blocks, we actually have to learn about 2 more categories of blocks. The first category that we'll go over is sensing. And sensing is the category that comes right after control. And as the name implies, it can sense different conditions, such as what the sprite is touching or what keys are pressed. There are 2 new types of blocks in this category. Pointed blocks, like these ones, and round blocks, like this one. And the pointed blocks are what we're going to focus on for this chapter. The round blocks are the subject of next chapter. So the pointed blocks actually fit inside of the if-then statements. The if-then statement then checks if what the pointed block senses is sensed. When they're put together, they form a question that is asked before the code is executed. If this section seems a little confusing, that's alright. You don't actually have to understand it in full right now, so don't worry. We'll be using this category slowly and gradually, and as we use it in more programs, you'll get to know it in a little more detail, and you'll hopefully get to understand it a little bit better. So the most common use of these if-then statements is actually to get user input. They have other uses as well, but the if-then blocks shine when it comes to receiving, checking, and using input from the program user. So to demonstrate this, let's make a program that utilizes a conditional statement. So, as always, to begin, let's grab a when green flag click block and drag it to the code area. Then, to illustrate how conditional statements can be used to get user input, we're going to create a simple program that checks if the sprite is touching the cursor, and then moves to a random location if it is. Since we want the program to continuously check if the sprite is touching the cursor, the next block that we'll use is the forever block. This way, any code we put inside will be run over and over again until we stop the program. Then we're going to find the if-then block, which is actually right underneath the forever block. And this is our conditional statement. Next, we're going to go to the motion section and find the go to random position block and put it inside this normal sized opening inside of the if-then block, not the pointed hole. Now the code should look like this, with the when green flag clicked, then the forever block, then the if-then block with the go to random position inside of the if-then block. And our code isn't finished yet. If we run the program as it is, the cat's not going to do anything. And that's because we actually haven't finished our conditional statement. We need to put something in that pointed hole if we want the code to run. So to finish the conditional statement, let's go to the sensing category. Since we want to check if the sprite is touching the cursor, let's find the touching mouse pointer, which is the first block, and then we're going to click it and drag it into that pointed hole from before. You'll know that it's ready to go in when you see that the pointed hole is highlighted in white. And then when you put it in, it should look something like this. Now, when you run the program, nothing will happen at first, but if you move the cursor to touch the cat will suddenly jump across the screen. So the program will first check if the sprite is touching the cursor. If they're not touching, nothing happens and the code repeats. If it is touching, the code will make it so that the sprite moves, and then the code repeats. The forever loop will make it so that the program will check the conditions forever, over and over again, so that the program's always going to work, no matter how long you keep the program running. And so this should give you a good idea of how if-then statements are used to get user input. And there's actually one more if-then or conditional statement in Scratch, and if we go to the control category, we'll see it right underneath the if-then statement. It's known as the if-else statement. It's very similar to the if-then statement. It first checks a condition, then runs some code if it's true. However, if it's not true, it'll run a different set of code instead of doing nothing. So, let's try it out. So, drag this random position block, go to random position, and the touching mouse pointer block out of the if-then block, and just drag them off to the side so we can save them. Then, drag the if-then block to the code storage to delete it, and then drag the if-then-else block, which is a little larger, inside of the forever block. Then replace the touching mouse pointer block inside of the pointed hole, and then put the go to random position block in the first square opening inside of the if then else block. Your code should now look something like this, which says when green flag click, then forever, then the if then else block with the touching mouse pointer in the pointed hole and the go to random position in the first opening. If we run the program now, the code is going to do exactly the same thing as before. But that's not what we want, then why use this block, right? So let's make it a little more fun, and let's have the sprite say something to the user. So let's go to the look section, and let's drag a say hello for 2 seconds block into this second opening. Now, you can change the message to whatever you want. So, for example, I'm going to have it say, can't catch me. Right? So, basically, this sprite is taunting the user, saying that they can't catch it. Then, we're going to change the timing to 1 second instead of 2 seconds. And then we're going to drag another say hello block, and then drag it into this first opening above the go to random position block. And then here, we're going to have it say something if it gets caught, quote unquote, by the cursor. So I'm going to have it say, oh no. And then change this time to 1 second as well. So basically, if we run this program, we'll see that the sprite will say can't catch me. And then if you do catch it, it'll say oh no, and then it'll move. So basically, you'll see that just using a few blocks, you've actually just created your first game in Scratch. Hopefully you can see just how powerful conditional statements can be. Just try to think of all the possibilities. There's so much you can do with this. So for now, stop the program and save the project as conditional statements. So you can always come back to here and understand and remember what you've learned. For now, I hope you're excited to get started with this next part of this book because we're going to do a lot more together. So, let's go.